Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the FreeMan Show. Glad you decided to come on by. It is a lovely sunny autumn day here in the Willamette Valley. A little bit chilly last night, but it's going to warm up quite a bit. The skies are clear and the sun is shining brightly. This is pretty big stuff. This first episode, we're gonna cover a lot of ground. Gonna plant some rather important seeds, principal seeds. It's taken me a while to get this first episode together because I just published my second book. It's my first nonfiction book that I've published, and that was a couple weeks ago, and I have been waiting for my physical copy to show up. You're Not the Boss of Me, A Primer for Human Freedom. This is my first nonfiction book, and the material in this book is makes up a fair amount of the soil from which the tree of knowledge that I am sharing with you comes forward. The knowledge in this book is knowledge that I have gained through direct experience over the course of the past 4 years or so. I've always been interested in how the world actually works and what the fuck we're doing here, what the fuck we even are. And when I was about 16, and I had a lot of free time, I did a lot of studying. I researched how the world works rather heavily. And while certain bodies of scientific knowledge proved to be very valuable, there was something that I just couldn't tap into, something that seemed obscured. And the truth is that the way things really work, the laws of nature, natural law, has been obfuscated. It has been obscured deliberately because a small group of evil people that really, really hates everybody else has sought for a very long time to maintain a power differential because they hate us so much. They can't stand the idea of us getting strong and taking our freedom back, taking our power back from them, because they've stolen it from us by obscuring the knowledge of natural law from us. But the thing is that the knowledge of natural law has been preserved and handed down by different traditions since time immemorial. Furthermore, while most of us have become so toxic in our minds and our bodies that we're not aware of it, the laws of nature are written inside of our hearts. We know what's right and what's wrong. We know that in our heart. It's just that since we were babies, we've been force-fed all of this bullshit that clouds our perception. I mean, I remember when I was very, very young, and the gut and heart resistance that I've had to authority of any kind was always there. And it became very, very apparent when I entered grade school. I distinctly remember second grade and having my teacher, who was under the delusion that she had power over me, ordering me around, bossing me around. And that, we have this intuitive sense that teachers and parents and siblings, that these are people we're supposed to be able to trust. And so we become rather disillusioned when we start to rediscover the truth and recognize that, oh, they're crazy. It's something that Adyashanti said. Adyashanti is a spiritual teacher, very poetic and beautiful man. He says that when he was growing up, he had a fair amount of unease because he couldn't quite figure out why things were so wrong. And he experienced exquisite relief when he realized, oh, these people are crazy. What a relief. What a relief to recognize that our parents and teachers and siblings and everyone who's under the delusion that they have authority over other people is crazy, insane in their beliefs. It's not to say that they're necessarily, evil or anything. I mean, it's wrong to delude yourself into thinking that you have authority over other people, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily like malicious people. It's just, they've been brainwashed with this idea that power differentials are an okay thing to have in human relationships. They're not. Power differentials in human relationships are violent. Violent to establish, violent to maintain, and a distortion of the truth. The truth is, we are all sovereign. Every human being is a sovereign creature. And that sovereignty is something that can really only take hold. You can only develop that sense of internal monarchy by recognizing that no one else has authority over you. So we're gonna get into how that's the case here in this very first episode. So the laws of nature, it behooves one to examine the 7 Hermetic principles, which we'll go into in another video. The gist of it is that there are laws which govern the behavior of all phenomena in creation. These laws are eternal and immutable, and they cannot be subverted. You can't avoid the laws of creation. They apply everywhere all the time. So we're not going to go into the 7 Hermetic principles in this first episode. What I want to do is to get the seeds of sovereignty planted in your heart and your mind so that you can start developing the freedom that is your birthright today. Because it's not something like we can talk about how freedom is your birthright and discuss the intellectual concepts a lot, but what is more powerful is to tune into the gut instinct that you are free and no one has the right to rule over you. So, to begin, the most essential aspect of natural law that you can integrate and carry with you for the rest of your life is the pillars of enlightenment. The divine feminine principle of non-aggression, do no harm, and the divine masculine principle of self-defense, take no shit. Do no harm, take no shit. If you remained ignorant of every other aspect of the laws of nature and simply just remembered to do no harm and take no shit, that alone is enough for you to intuitively align with the laws of nature and thus be and practice being a moral person. So taking this knowledge of the pillars of enlightenment, that the objective moral laws of creation require that you do no harm and take no shit, there is a mental tool that I have used in discerning which of my thoughts, emotions, and actions are right and which are wrong. And that comes from asking the question, from earnestly asking the question, does this thought, emotion, or action cause harm? And if the answer is yes, then that thought, emotion, or action is wrong. If the answer is no, then that thought, emotion, or action is a right. If you apply this crucible to your thoughts, emotions, and actions, you will experience greater and greater levels of freedom all the time. Because what you'll find is that when you only choose to cultivate or agree with thoughts and emotions that are your right, and disagree with and discard, prune away from the garden of your mind thoughts and emotions that are wrong, the more that you'll find that your actions generally gravitate towards your rights as opposed to wrong actions. And the more of your rights that you exercise and the less wrong thoughts, emotions, and actions that you that you cultivate, the greater levels of freedom you will experience, because the laws of nature are such that your freedom, your individual experience of freedom, stems from your alignment with natural law. If you are completely in conflict with the laws of nature, you're not going to experience any freedom. You're going to be locked into bondage, mental, emotional, and to some degree even physical bondage, especially if you are under the impression that other people have authority over you. Because if you really believe in your heart that someone else has the right to rule over you, you're boned. That is not a good place to be in, because it's in conflict with the laws of nature for one being to have authority over or attempt to possess or rule over another being. It's directly in conflict with the laws of nature. You can't do it. It's unlawful. It's wrong, and you will suffer the consequences from it. Not just as the perpetrator of it, but as the victim of it. Because the person who is attempting to exert authority over you, they actually get less baggage from that, less negative consequences from that than you do if you capitulate to it. Which is kind of fucked up, but it makes sense, because it's very, very core principle stuff that you have to recognize that no one has the right to rule over you, that you own your mind, your body, and your soul. They belong to you. They're your property. So this idea is really essential. We really need to drive this point home, because all of the evil that takes place in the world, in human affairs primarily, exclusively in human affairs. The reason that all of that evil takes place is under the notion that authority exists, that one man or an organization can have authority over other people. All of the evil in the world stems from that idea. Because if you do anything, if anything that you do is predicated on that lie, it's evil. It's unlawful. Whatever comes out of that is evil. Now, bear in mind, prudence is something that has to be taken into account. One must be aware that if a violent psychopath with a costume and a badge is under the impression that they rule over you, and if you don't obey their orders, that it could result in harm coming to you. Those are situations where it takes some diplomacy to navigate. What's interesting though is that there must be some discernment exercised between navigating a situation where someone under the delusion that they have authority over you is attempting to impose their will on you. It's not necessarily wise or prudent to tell them, you don't have authority over me. When someone is that insane, it requires a certain amount of intuitive wisdom. Because if someone's that insane, they're going to... If you assert your sovereignty in a situation like that, it can cause such intense cognitive dissonance in the insane person that they might react violently. This is just something to be aware of. You know, what we mostly need to focus on when visualizing those kinds of scenarios, if you choose to visualize those kinds of scenarios, is recognizing in your heart and your guts that it's not right for this other person to impose their will on you, that they don't actually have authority over you. That's the important thing to recognize. Along with that is there's this thing that's been impressed upon most of us, which is to react with some kind of like guilt and shame if we don't capitulate to other people's authority. And that's a really fucking poisonous thing. Because if someone is attempting to impose their will on you because they are under the delusion that they have authority over you, there's no reason, no good reason for you to feel bad, like you're a bad person because you don't agree with obedience to this other person's will. It's totally natural for you to be resistant to that because that is violent. People attempting to impose their will on other people is violence. So, recognizing that pathology in myself and in pretty much everybody else that I know, and having worked with it and developed practices that allowed me to transcend that, I wrote this book. Because this title, You're Not the Boss of Me, is something that will empower you. When someone is attempting to impose their will on you, even if you don't say it out loud to them, in your heart and your mind, you can vibrate, "You're not the boss of me," and feel divine power course through your entire being. That power is your sovereignty. It belongs to you. It is your birthright. Your mind, your heart, your soul, and your body, they belong to you. They are your property. And when someone else attempts to violate your right to those things, you have the right to defend yourself from that violence, to prevent harm by whatever force is required up to and including lethal force. Now, there's something to bear in mind here, which is that when you stand your ground and assert, "You're not the boss of me," it's important for that to be something that doesn't, that there isn't like malice in it, right? Because there is this animalistic tendency that we have when someone is attempting to do us violence to react violently in return. I think that that's like old leftover stuff, from before we started developing higher consciousness. That's real survival stuff, and it has value. But being that we are much more highly evolved creatures than those who are bound to certain animalistic tendencies, we have the capacity to rise to a higher level of consciousness and being in a situation where someone is attempting to do us violence, where we can recognize that this person is not doing this out of critical thought and conscious intent. This is violent behavior that has been programmed into them. They have been through the inundation of psychological and chemical warfare over the course of their whole life, as well as a very well-designed process of indoctrination. They have been led into a intricate delusion that they have authority over other people and that they have the right to do harm to other people, to steal from other people, to restrict other people in their freedom of travel, or to actually commit violence upon other people. So it's important to recognize that and not necessarily be like standoffish toward the person, because it's not the person that is evil, it's the behavior that's evil. It's the thought patterns, the beliefs, and the emotions that come with that, which lead to the violent behavior. That stuff is what's wrong, not the person, right? It's not that like people are, if they're indoctrinated to the point where they feel inclined to engage in that behavior, it's not that they're damned. It's that is damnable behavior. It's a very important distinction to make, because you'll recognize that your anger can, because there is a tendency to feel righteous anger when someone is attempting to do you violence. It's important to recognize that anger can be directed at the systems of oppression and brainwashing that have been put in place, and not at the person who has fallen prey to them. Now, that's not to say that if someone is attempting to do you harm, that you don't defend yourself. If someone is attempting to do you harm, you have the right and the power will come to you to defend yourself by whatever force is required, up to and including lethal force. But that doesn't mean that it behooves you to cultivate and agree with and endorse hate within yourself towards people that are doing violence. Throw people out of your life, but don't throw them out of your heart. And I know that's hard, especially if somebody is being violent. But it's really important. I would say that's pretty much the gist of what I wanted to cover in this first episode. I really want to get the point across that there is a set of objective moral laws that we must adhere to. And the essence of those laws in human affairs is do no harm and take no shit. I love y'all. Thank you for tuning into the first episode. My book is available on Amazon. I will post the link in the description. I appreciate you. Toodles.